So here we are. It's February, which is also Black History Month. And for the record, Black history is American history. And we'll say this all day, every day until everyone gets on this train. So it's also not lost on us that this is the shortest month of the year. So Sarah, with all of that said, how has this Black History Month been or felt different for you thus far from our past ones?
We are in the year 2026, which is the longest year in history here in February. And I would say that this year, Black History Month feels to me invisible. Like it feels like that the conversations that we had after George Floyd was murdered and that sort of crescendoing of attention being paid to anti-Black racism has gone away entirely and or maybe even backtracked. Actually, for sure, backtracked. Because just this morning, as we're recording this conversation, our current President Trump shared a video portraying President Obama and his wife Michelle as apes, which evokes this longstanding racist trope against Black people. And he posted it on his very public Truth Social platform. And of course, there's been backtracking and it's been pulled down, but it was put out there by our president's social media account. It is virulently, hatefully racist.
Yeah, I want to say that also in all the backtracking, and there's always been blame put on staffers who do this. We all know who runs that Truth Social account because we know who posts on it in the middle of the night. Don't buy the excuses because that was only pulled down because there was a huge bipartisan support and the highest ranking Black Republican coming out and saying, hey, P.S., this is super racist for that to happen.
Yeah. And I think that's the kind of across the board clear line that we need more of our lawmakers to draw more regularly about big picture issues where there are things that are good for people and bad for it's not like that offend the humanity, that hurt the humanity of our citizens. We're not seeing people come out to stand up for. There's no line. This line keeps getting erased. So it was good to at least see some of that line show up today for the first time in I don't know how long. But I want to ask you the same question, Misasha, because as the mother of Black sons, of multi-racial, multi-ethnic sons that the world sees as Black, as you say, your kids are Black all year long. How is this month landing for you, for your family in 2026?
Yeah, my kids are still Black in 2026. No surprise. And to your point, Sarah, about the erasure of Black History Month, let's think about how many corporations have you seen talk about Black History Month? I can think of zero, actually, at this point. And whereas I feel in the past, feeds have been flooded with Black History Month this, let's celebrate Black excellence. I will say the only exception to that are the Black-owned brands that I follow and maybe a couple others.
I haven't been to Target recently. They used to have a whole Black artist, Black maker brands clothing section. I'm going to guess, just given what Target's been through, that it's not there this year.
Well, or either super performative, right? They'll have one thing and call it a day. Because I feel like those displays in Target for whatever month it is have been increasingly small. So, at this point, it may be a sticker. And I think we are seeing erasure of history as well on a huge writ large, right? And I'm going to talk about a couple of examples of that in a moment. But I think the part that I feel most disheartened about it is the conversations happening in schools or not happening in schools right now because, and I get it, look, there's a lot of fear out there, right? Because the administration is so openly racist and very retaliatory and very focused on creating a singular narrative that doesn't reflect the history of our country as we know it, that it causes silence, right? It causes people to not speak up about the things that matter. It causes people to not correct the incorrect stories that are being told about history. But silence is what feeds authoritarianism, right? Silence is what continues to fuel racism.
Yes. And as does the inability to tolerate ambiguity, right? We have to be able to say, yeah, we're a pretty good country still. And we did some pretty horrific things and are continuing to do some pretty horrific things. We have to be able to grapple with the fact that all of these things can be true at the same time, which goes back to your point about this erasure in school. Sorry if you were going to go there, but when I talk to my kids' middle school over the years that they used to be in middle school, the school principal continued to come back with, well, we don't tell our teachers what to say or do about Black History Month. We leave it up to them, which sounds fine, except you realize that in America, 70 or 80% of teachers are white women who may not have personal experience and may not have the education to understand how to even bring Black history into their individual classrooms, might not have the time because they certainly aren't getting paid enough to put in the extra time to do all of that. And when you have, like in our kids' case, only one single Black subject teacher, right? You have a lot of support teams who are Black. Like, you don't even have that representation to like really strongly encourage and emphasize from within the school that this is a topic, even if your students are very multi-ethnic. You don't have that groundswell of course, we have to talk about this because this is about our community. I think all the more a reason for parents to have to put all that pressure on the school to inquire, why are you not talking? What are you going to discuss? How can I help support and make it easy for your teachers to bring discussions about Black excellence and how Black history is American history into the classrooms for the kids?
Yeah. And, you're saying this in a state like Colorado, which actually still allows for racial discussions in curriculum, right? And not to mention states where now that is explicitly discouraged, frowned upon in all the ways possible. And so I think it's even more important when we're thinking about these next generations, right? For parents to be able to use our voices and say, can I come in and do that also? Because I have been the parent of the only Black kid in the entire elementary school. And yeah, like, am I going to go in there and do that? Sure. It would be great if other parents were interested in doing that as well. Because I think, to your point about many things can be true at once, we can feel afraid about speaking out now. And we still know that silence is complicity in a lot of ways. Those two things can be true at the same time. And so when we're thinking about this, I want to point out maybe a couple of examples of the more egregious forms of how history is being erased.
And let's back that out of just parents, right? This is not just for parents. Like, this is for all of us.
Well, it's hard and easy to talk about this in the abstract, right? Like, history is being erased. Great. What does that mean, right? So I think the more granular we can get on examples, the more specific we can be in how we think about changing this or how we think about talking about this. So I want to talk about an example that came up recently in the news this week about Medgar Evers. Medgar Evers was a civil rights legend, right? He was very influential in Mississippi in terms of organizing in the early civil rights movement. There is a national monument at his home, right, where he was gunned down and murdered by a white supremacist Klan member. And I want to be very clear, a white supremacist Klan member, because it's hard to disassociate the Klan with white supremacy because it was kind of the whole foundation of it. But we'll just put a pin in that because apparently that is an unpopular opinion these days. So the murder of Medgar Evers is a key part of our country's history, as was his life. And this is the site protected by the National Park Service until apparently like right now, because the National Park Service has removed visitor brochures from the Medgar and Marley Evers Home National Monument. So they've removed the visitor brochures because he said they're going to make changes to the visitor brochures. What changes, might you ask? Among other things, no longer calling his murderer a racist. I know. So edits to the brochure have removed that reference to Byron De La Beckwith, according to Park Service officials who asked not to be named for fear of retribution. That is the fear and the silence coming into play. Other edits include eliminating the reference to Medgar Evers lying in a pool of blood after being shot. I don't know. That seems like a fact to me, Sarah. Like, this guy was gunned down in front of his home, like lying in a pool of blood seems like
that's what happened.
So their daughter, Rena Evers Everett, who's the executive director of the Medgar and Marley Evers Institute, said that the family has been told that the matter is under review, but the final product has not been put out yet.
Yikes.
So just to back up, like for a little bit as to like what this whole scene was, right? Because in 1963, Beckwith shot Medgar Evers in the back, P.S., on the driveway of the Evers family home in Northwest Jackson, Mississippi. It would take 31 more years before a Mississippi jury would convict him. So, Jeff Steinberg, who is founder of Sojourn to the Past, which regularly takes students and police officers on civil rights tours to the home, questioned the change to the Park Service material. You can't call Beckwith a racist, he said. If you open a picture dictionary and turn to the definition for racist, you'd probably find a picture of Byron de la Beckwith. Because the original brochures pulled from the home called Beckwith, quote, a member of the racist and segregationist White Citizens Council. And Stephanie Rolfe, author of Resisting Equality, the Citizens Council, 1954 to 1989, said that the council, quote, believed in the natural superiority of the Aryan race. They even went so far as to say that civilizations failed because of race mixing.
That sounds like the classic definition of a racist.
I'm not sure what other word you would use for him here. I'm not sure what other word you would use for people who are on the white citizens. I mean, it's literally in the name, right? Like, I don't know. Anyway, the Washington Post, like PS RIP to journalism at the Washington Post, right, has previously reported that the administration has ordered the removal of signs and exhibits related to slavery at multiple national parks, including an 1863 photo that Christian abolitionists used to prove the horrors of state slavery, which was the picture of a Black man whose back was covered in scars from beating while enslaved. And Sarah, to your point, like, this is our history. This is a painful part of our history, but this actually happened. So the fact that we don't talk about it does not mean that it never happened, right? The fact that we try and create different stories around it means that those are lies. And so I think we should be really direct and clear with the words we use right now.
Let's be clear. We teach our 3-year-olds the difference between truth and a lie. Like, there is such a thing as truth and there is such a thing as a lie. Let's just come back to basics here on that one.
This isn't going to stop with racism, right? Because this directive applies to a lot of other isms as well. And, you know, sexism, slavery, gay rights, persecution of indigenous people, right? These changes and replacing true facts in history with lies meant to make people feel better about themselves, perhaps, is going on right now all the time. So it's really important that we're aware of that so we can tell the truth in instances when it would be more convenient, or perhaps we would feel safer at times, you know, going along with the administration's party line, for lack of a better word.
Party line is a good one. Yeah. I mean, I think the parallel to this seems to be, and I don't want to stray from Black History Month, but this idea of like, let's obscure the truth, like all of the Epstein files being blacked out. Like, let's pretend that this isn't happening. Like, we're continuing to try to obfuscate. I don't know why that word is coming out of my face right now, but like, it's a big word, but like, we're trying to smear it and we're trying to pretend that there is not such a thing as truth. And that has been like the really hard part about how our society has been built for the last several decades with social media and the proliferation of everybody's 15 seconds of fame and all of this stuff. But let's come back to this. Like, these things happened in our country, and taking down signs and changing words around it is not going to change the truth unless we let our heads be buried in the sand and say, nah, 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 like slavery never happened. We never mistreated Black people. Like, come on.
Yeah. And, you know, I think part of this goes back to the fact that we never really addressed slavery as a nation, right? Like, we blew past the Civil War. We let people who were Confederate generals and Confederates still have all their like stuff back, basically, which is super wild. Like, they lost the war and we're like, you know what? Cool, here you go. So we never had this national reckoning, right? And so now we are seeing centuries later, like, what the after effects of that are, right? Because now we have a convenient other narrative based on lies, based on comfort or perceived comfort by certain individuals. Yeah. But one thing that does give me hope in this is that we do have people out there who are willing to point out racism where it exists. And I think the most powerful example of it this week was Judge Ana Reyes, who is a district court judge in the District of Columbia, who basically issued a ruling on Monday night, which saved the temporary protected status of 300,000 Haitians in the United States. And why that was important was because, to back up a little bit, the U.S. has had this designation of temporary protected status, or TPS, for refugees from countries where it has been deemed unsafe for them to remain in their country. And this has been a hallmark of the U.S. immigration policy for some time now. And Haiti received this designation, or Haitians received this designation after there was that devastating earthquake in Haiti in 2010. And the country has become increasingly unstable, increasingly violent. And so Haitians have been granted TPS in the US. Late November of last year, the Trump administration declared that status was going to end for Haitians on February 3rd. Then they announced that their next ICE surge would be starting in Springfield, Ohio on February 4th. Coincidence? No. So I think also it's really important to remember that Springfield, Ohio was where Trump and Vance during the 2024 campaigning made completely facetious and later completely debunked remarks about Haitian immigrants in that city. It should also be noted that since they made those remarks, Springfield, Ohio, which had been thriving due to the influx of Haitian immigrants, which had upped the city's population, which was rapidly shrinking prior to that point. Since those comments were made, even though they've been completely debunked, the number of businesses who have applied to do business in Springfield, new businesses, is zero. Zero. And so we need to think about the wide-ranging effects of racist comments past in the moment, past being debunked. That's why telling the truth so clearly is important. Okay, back to Judge Reyes, because she wrote an opinion on Monday night, which was 83 pages long, but was one of the best legal opinions I have read. And I think partially because she says what it is very clearly. She says the administration is racist because they are, right? And I think the really important part of her calling that out is because there is a lot of subterfuge, right? That the administration, or like sort of all these, different ways, just like that Truth Social post this morning, right? Which the administration tries to backtrack or hide this very overt racism. And she wasn't having it. And I was really happy to see that, because she was basically like, hey, Secretary Noem, as Christy Noem, you can say whatever you want about people. That's your First Amendment, right? As the secretary, though, in your cabinet role, you can't. And your racism is showing. And so I'm not saying, well, I am saying to read the entire 83-page opinion, but I am saying that. But I'm also a realist on that regard. I would just read the start and the end too, because she says some really great things about it. And it gives me a lot of hope that you have judges who are still willing to stand up to the administration. And in normal, regular times, this would be called a judge doing her job. And in this time, in 2026, it's called a judge being a hero. It gives me a little hope. But, when I'm thinking about Judge Reyes, like, she has the ability to issue these opinions from the bench, right? Probably the vast majority, if not all of us who are listening, are not judges. So what can we do about this, really, is the question that I keep coming back to, right? Like, what can we do about the shifting narrative, or in some cases, the entire whitewashing and rewriting of history? What are the questions we should be asking? What are the conversations we should be having? So, Sarah, like, in all of that, what comes to mind? What's top of mind for you?
You're like, here, answer these 17 questions, please.
Right. Answer 17 questions, no pressure. Go.
Solve world peace. I'll wave like I'm in a pageant. No, so I think the things that come to mind, because this idea of, standing up against whitewashing of history feels deeply overwhelming, right? And it's like, oh, what can a little voice do? And I think one of the things I love is this idea of Black excellence. I loved putting together our latest newsletter. If you're not subscribed to it, go grab it. It's on our website. What do you mean by that.com, I think is our website. And I love this idea of, just the same as people are trying to whitewash history, sometimes the greatest things that are out there, we don't know the story behind, right? We don't know who invented the red, green, and yellow stoplight, a Black man. Like, we don't know the contributions that have been made from Black people, especially if we're going to be focusing on Black History Month. And so highlighting examples of Black excellence, humanizing the contributions that people have made, I think is a huge one that we can know about and talk about. And I think the other thing is stuff that we've talked about for years on the show. It's like helping people understand what racism is, how it is in the air we breathe, right? It doesn't inherently mean that you're a bad person, though if you are actually murdering people or like causing physical harm, causing verbal harm, yes, you are acting on these racist beliefs. But this idea, racism is the system that we're currently in, right? We live in this water. And so we probably have ingested some of it. And we then need to think about, is it seeping out into our actions? And how can we take anti-racist actions? You know, Misasha, forever you've talked about Dr. Beverly Tatum's example of the moving walkway in an airport, right? Like it's those horizontal, slow moving, like horizontal escalators where it just makes it easier and it's carrying the country in one direction. And I'm just going to repeat this for the sake of those who haven't heard it before. And then I want to turn it over to you. But our country is moving in this direction of racism. And if you're standing on that moving walkway and you're hustling in the same direction, you are doing the harm. You are causing the harm. You are an active racist, like the guy that you were talking about earlier, Beckwith, right? Like that is causing harm actively. Say you're not doing any of that harm, but you're just standing on the walkway. What direction are you moving? You're benignly still moving in the direction of racism. The only way to be an anti-racist is to turn the other way and actively take steps fighting against the tide of racism. And that could mean stuff like asking your school, what are you doing for Black History Month? Talking to your friends and family, interrupting harmful jokes or tropes or anything, calling people out in a way that doesn't always have to provoke defensiveness, but sort of saying, this is not how we talk about people in our country, in our community. And so there's a lot of ways that we can take action to correct the harms that our racist system is pulling us in. So I think that understanding that, teaching that to people and doing those actions are also things that come to mind when you talk about, you know, what do we do? What can we do? What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think those are important because I think especially in 2026, community is so important, right? And thinking about, I think people get overwhelmed when we think about this on a national scale, right? And the fact that the news is throwing 25 terrible things at us all at once. But I think about how can you change the narrative in your local community, right? And, you know, Sarah, to your point, that is schools, right? And I also don't think you need to reinvent the wheel. There are a lot of great resources out there that talk about Black excellence and Black history. And if you have questions about which ones we love, please reach out. But you can bring that into a school setting. You can bring that into a book club setting. You can bring that into a parent group setting. You can bring a lot of different resources. You don't have to be the expert, right? But we can learn about parts of history that we were never taught in schools together, right, as adults. And we can make sure that our kids are getting better than what we got and that we're protecting their right to have that as well, I think. I also love, obviously, we have this podcast is called What Do You Mean by That? And I love the ability to just ask questions to get people to think a little bit because you do have, as we've talked about in past episodes, right, huge media bias. And if you are consuming, depending on what media you're consuming, your view of history is probably very different than your neighbors. And so I think just asking questions to kind of get people to think like, wait, how is a Klansman not racist? What do you mean by that? If someone's like, well, that, you know, they removed it because he's not a racist, like, oh, can you tell me more about why that's the case? And I think coming at it from, like we always talk about, like from a place of curiosity rather than a place of shaming is how we get those conversations to open. But I do agree. I think to the point going back about Trump posting or like depicting the Obamas, who is like an actual president of our country, right? And his wife, Michelle Obama, like amazing in her own right as apes. Like we have a lot of the negative depictions, right? So let's talk about all of the great things. And we also should make that conversation bigger than, although they are very important, like Martin Luther King Jr., Rosa Parks, Malcolm X, like those are really important figures. And they weren't the three Black people, the sole three Black people to exist in America. Those are great people to talk about. And there are so many more. So this Black History Month, I encourage you to go out there and learn for yourself, right? Learn for yourself, share that with your communities. And hopefully we can continue to push back against the blatantly racist tropes that are coming out of this administration and the whitewashing of history that we are witnessing real time.
You've been listening to What Do You Mean by That? A show dedicated to being better humans and getting loud for all of us. Hat tip to Sarah's daughter for the logo, and huge thanks to Misasha's son for our incredible theme music. Find out more and subscribe to our newsletter at whatdoyoumeanbythat.com. because as always, it's all of us or it's none of us.